Tabloid media. Entire stories stacked upon rumor, legend, or lies. Sometimes rooted in truth, but quickly buried so deep in fluff that even attempting to find its origins can be a lost cause. It may be frustrating for fact-finders and those who despise wasted time, but it doesn't stop them from being fun to talk about. The following are two of my personal favorites, two supposedly cursed objects from the UK, two of which you can actually see for yourself. There's truly no proper coverage of haunted chairs if we aren't talking about the infamous cursed throne of Thomas Busby. It's the epitome of a legend, one that truly seems to have some basis in fact. But what follows just sounds like a collection of fables. Either way, it's a worthy story to tell. And if you're in the UK, you can see the source of this legend yourself. From what we know, Thomas Busby lived somewhere around the village of Kirby Wisk in North Yorkshire in the early 18th century. We don't know anything about his life beyond the fact that he was married to Elizabeth Audie and operated a small criminal empire with his father-in-law named Daniel Audie. Thomas and Daniel worked together in a variety of underworld activities, specializing mainly in counterfeiting currency, also known as coining. It was certainly a unique family business, but like most crime stories, they didn't end well. On March 17, 1702, Busby and Audie found themselves in the throes of a heated argument related to Busby's relationship with Audie's daughter. This ended with Busby murdering his father-in-law in cold blood. However, some sources suggest Daniel Audie never knew of Thomas's criminal involvement and that they never worked together, with Daniel instead discovering and disapproving of his shady dealings. According to legend, Thomas bludgeoned him to death with either a hammer or a similar blunt object. Legend says that the murder happened at the same inn where Thomas and Elizabeth lived. Obviously, since this was in broad daylight, Busby was quickly arrested for his actions. Come his trial in April 1702, Thomas reportedly didn't do much to help his case. Not only did his criminal lifestyle get exposed in the process, but he also lashed out in anger during the trial. It was open and shut. Thomas Busby was sentenced to hang the following month. And in May 1702, he was set to be taken to the gallows in York, but not before requesting his transport to stop by his favorite inn one last time. It was during this stop that Busby supposedly had one last thing to say to everyone in that pub. A warning, quote, "May sudden death come to anyone who dare sit in my chair." That was the beginning of the infamous curse. Thomas Busby was hanged. His body then moved to the Sand Hutton Crossroads, now the junction of A61 and A167, where it was suspended by chains from a gibbet, a deterrent meant to disenchant potential new criminals as to say, "This could be you next." Scarce as records may be, it seems the death of Thomas Busby generated quite a bit of buzz at the time. In fact, the poet William Grange once wrote in 1859, quote, "The bones of the poor wretch who had committed murder were hung to fester in the sunshine and blow in the tempest, until they fell piecemeal to earth, and tradition yet tells the tale of night wanderers being terrified when passing this dreaded spot." And mind you, this is only the beginning of the story. The pub the condemned man seemed to like so much was even named after him, known as the Thomas Busby Inn, later called the Busby Stoop. And for over 200 years, the establishment continued to keep Thomas's special chair right there, as if he had never left. Well, according to some, Thomas never did. His restless spirit continued to haunt his favorite watering hole. That theory definitely carries weight if you take into account what happened to those who didn't heed that warning made so long ago. What happened for the rest of the 1700s remains a mystery, but the first known victim to the chair was a chimney sweep in 1894. He sat down in the chair, only to be found the next morning hanging near the gibbet that Thomas's body was hanging more than a century earlier. Skipping ahead to World War II, a story persists involving a group of Canadian airmen hailing from the nearby Skipton-on-Sway base, who visited the pub together, daring each other to see who was brave enough to sit in the chair. The ones who decided to eventually die overseas. Staying on topic with the military, decades later, in 1967, 2 Royal Air Force pilots took the challenge and each sat in the Busby chair. When they eventually drove away from the pub, their car, unfortunately, hit a tree, resulting in the deaths of both men. Not even that long after the incident, a builder was challenged to take a seat in the cursed chair, and that very same day at the worksite, fatally fell from the roof he was working on. It seems Thomas Busby's chair is indiscriminate with its dark curse. No matter the intention, if you sit in it, your days are numbered, whether you dare to do so or not. This rings true for a cleaner who fell victim to the chair as well. They were in the middle of mopping the pub's floors when they accidentally tripped or stumbled, using the chair to break their fall. Now, this person wasn't met with an instantaneous death like others had, but it's said that the cleaner perished from a brain tumor sometime later. In 1978, Tony Earnshaw, the landlord of the Busby Stoop, finally removed the chair from the floor and placed it in the establishment's cellar, away from the curious public who'd risk their lives over the curse. But even down below, it wasn't safe, for a delivery driver just so happened to run into it whilst doing his work down there. It was perplexing to see some random chair down with the beer barrels, so he curiously sat down, thinking nothing of it. When the unloading was finished, he returned to his truck and moved on with his schedule. The driver lost his life in a car accident just miles down the road. At this point, Tony Earnshaw had just about enough. He donated the chair to the Thirsk Museum, officially moving the historic chair from its long-standing home for the first time ever. And with no pun intended, this action was both a blessing and a curse, effectively putting an end to the paranormal liability, but also removing the main attraction to the old pub. As the 20th century moved on, so did customer traffic. Ownership changed hands a few more times, and the 300-year-old establishment eventually shuttered in 2016. A derelict old husk was all that remained for a handful of years until it was finally demolished in 2020. The walls that carried a library of memories since the colonial period were no more. But one memento made it out alive: that old chair. Interestingly enough, the old Busby chair was examined by historian Dr. Adam Bowitt, and he made a discovery that puts the entire story into question. According to his findings, the spindles of the chair were clearly machine-turned, which was a process not yet available in the 17th century, rather in the 18th century during the Industrial Revolution. Back in 1702, such craftwork was done using the foot-pedal-powered pole lathe, which means that this chair was produced sometime after the year 1840. You can view Thomas Busby's infamous chair at the Thirsk Museum today in North Yorkshire, where it remains suspended in the air by the ceiling as to prevent any more daring individuals from sitting down on it. When you consider the inconsistencies of exactly when this chair was made and the shaky ground in which these various stories stand on, a question remains for the viewers. Would you sit in Thomas Busby's chair if you had the chance? It is just a legend, isn't it? We advance to yet another item supposedly plagued by a dreaded curse. Not one based in anger and post-mortem dread, but rather sadness. in its purest form. In the 1950s, Italian artist Giovanni Bragolina, his real name Bruno Amarillo, produced a series of paintings depicting crying children that were then mass-produced. The prints found particular success in England through the years, but the one we're referring to today is this one. It's a straightforward piece. A child stares off to the side with tears running down his face, evoking a feeling of melancholy or despair. There's no clear-cut inspiration for this piece that we know of, but considering it was produced shortly after the Second World War, one could imagine that it takes a page from the feelings of suffering now that the smoke has finally cleared. By the time the legend of its supposed curse was discovered, the artwork had already been available for about 3 decades. In 1985, a firefighter from Yorkshire named Peter Hall came forward to the popular English tabloid paper, The Sun, with an interesting story connected to the painting. According to Hall, a series of fires plaguing northern England shared an interesting piece of evidence: undamaged copies of the crying boy. No matter the severity of these blazes, each house that contained the painting never saw the paintings destroyed. This trend had become so common that Peter brought it up to his brother, Ron Hall. Despite his brother's seriousness, Ron discounted the theory that the sorrowful painting had anything to do with these fires, saying they were only coincidences. In fact, to prove this was all a hoax, Ron went out of his way to purchase a print of his own and placed it in his Swallownest, South Yorkshire home. But it wouldn't be long before he himself learned the hard way. Ron Hall's home became yet another building claimed by fire, supposedly from the painting. His house was completely destroyed, yet somehow, somewhere in the rubble, the crying boy still sat there, totally unharmed. Furious by his loss and that the curse was apparently real, Ron Hall stomped the painting as hard as he could. Now, with a publication as sensational as The Sun responsible for these stories, it's wise to take the following claims with a fine grain of salt. But supposedly, after investigating similar incidents connected to the painting, it turned out that a small epidemic seemed to sweep the region involving similar occurrences. In Mitcham, Surrey, a woman named Dora Brand lost her home to a fire only 6 weeks after purchasing the crying boy. She had many other paintings in her home, but the only one to make it out unscathed was this one. The same happened to the Darnell family of Rotherham, who also purchased the painting only shortly before their house perished in a fire. The piece just so happened to make it as well. A woman named Miss Woodward from Forest Hill destroyed her copy of the picture, believing it to be the cause of death for her husband and 3 sons, who each happened to die in fire-related incidents. In West Supermare, Avon, 67-year-old William Armitage lost his life in an unexpected fire in his house. When the fire department discovered his badly burned body, the crying boy was found lying right beside William, unharmed. According to the story, a fireman who was at the scene said, quote, "I've never believed in the jinx up until now, but when you actually come across a picture in a gutted room and it's literally the only thing that hasn't been touched, it is most odd." There's little evidence to truly confirm any of these tales, beyond the fact that the painting itself is very much real. But why this one? Why the crying boy? Was it just chosen out of random in 1985 to serve as the next big spooky circulation? Granted, this isn't the first time a painting has been tied to negative energy and misfortune. The Anguished Man is the first alternative that comes to mind. It's a painting depicting exactly what the name entails, an agonized, screaming man whose mysterious creator made it to illustrate his own turmoil, whatever that was. In fact, the story goes that this painter added his very own blood to the piece right before taking his own life. Since then, it's been associated not only with strange energy, but even paranormal activity. One of its signature features is the sound of disembodied weeping, apparently by the painter, who bound his life force to the picture. But even more so, chilling phenomena like shadow beings and strange sensations are connected to it. And even with all that, there are likely dozens of cursed or haunted paintings that can be lumped in next to the Yorkshire Crying Boy. Why so many survive the fires is a mystery, but there is one explanation, somewhat of a possibility, that of fire-resistant materials. Mass-produced art prints such as these were often coated in special varnishes to prevent such damage, so that's always something to consider. There's also the notion that, just like the Anguished Man, the original artist, Giovanni Bragolina, may have conspired with dark, sinister forces whilst making the painting in order for it to cause such mayhem. As it stands, it's still only an urban legend, but many questions remain. Out of all the crying children from this series, what is it about this painting that wrought so much chaos in England? What about it seems to bring fire wherever it goes? And, if anything else, what could be the true meaning behind the painting?